I'm Helen.
I'm James.
And we are global nomads. In 2004, we made the crazy decision to sell everything in the UK and move to Florida and open a flower shop. In 2024, we decided we'd make another crazy decision and sold our business, our home, and everything we owned to travel the world full time.
So come with us each week and see where our next adventure takes us.
And today, welcome to
Hobart. We took our car rental and drove the 116 miles. It took us just over 2 hours to go from Launceston to Hobart. This journey is called the Heritage Highway, and there's lots of different places to stop, so that 2 hours can become a whole day event. But we chose to make a couple of stops on this journey.
So we just made a quick stop in
Campbelltown,
and we wanted a coffee, and we are at Banjo's Bakery, and we got a coffee and this most fabulous looking cream donut. Look at that. And you got a donut and coffee, so we're going to see what they're like. OMG, I just had the cream and that tasted fabulous. It's light, it's fluffy, it's creamy.
Is it proper cream?
It's proper cream.
It's proper cream, people. Helen's verdict out of 10?
That's a solid 9.5.
9.5. Stay tuned for more cream cake recommendations. So this behind me is a statue of Eliza Furlong and her ram, because this is where merino wool comes from. This is what it's famous for. Eliza was born in Glasgow, and she went to Germany, and she searched Saxony to find the best merino wool sheep.
And descendants of those sheep
still
are still roaming around this area, apparently.
So welcome to Mount Wellington over Hobart. We've just managed to get here. It's about 4,157 feet, or about 1,200 meters up. It was a bit of a hair-raising drive.
Don't come up here if you're not a confident driver, let's put it that way.
We rented the car from Launceston, and before we dropped it off, we wanted to go and see a couple of the sites. So we drove up here, and it's about 30 minutes from the centre of Hobart, but it's worth the view, isn't it?
Definitely worth the view, but top tip, bring a jacket. It's cold up here. We just dropped all our stuff at the hotel already, and I don't have a jacket.
It's March here, so the weather's not too bad.
Autumn,
but they do have snow and ice, and the roads can be closed down. But the view you can see all over the centre of Hobart, and all of the water, and
the bay,
the bays, and
the Tasman Bridge. It's a pretty spectacular view.
Well worth it. They've got this little observation deck or somewhere for you to hide out if the weather is particularly bad.
Note to self though, there are some decks to get down here, but if you want to get down to the actual viewing platform, there are steps. So if you are in a wheelchair, you're not going to be able to do that. You can get a little ways down and you can walk around this top area though.
There's about 3 viewing points. There's the one overlooking the rocks, there's the one overlooking the bay, which is where the observation point is, and then there's the one that looks like you have to climb a cliff to get to it.
And if you're into hiking, if that's your thing, it looks like there's a ton of different hikes. There are a couple of other stopping points on the way up as well that you can do various trails. And we did spot one pull-in that was a scenic point, but we'd driven past it by the time. and you're not stopping, it's steep. So yeah, definitely worth the trip though. Nice viewing point.
From the photos inside, it looks like this is somewhere that you would definitely be good to come for sunrise or sunset, because it does look pretty spectacular.
So there you go, if you're here, make the trip. So we decided that we were going to return the rental car early, mainly because the hotel that we are staying at in Hobart is right in the city centre, and I discovered the day before that we drove down here that you can only valet park, and it's $80 a day. Yes, $80 a day. That's mad. And I had also read that basically if you need to give them like 15 minutes notice to go and get your car because it's parked off site, and it all seemed like it was going to be a big hassle. And a couple things that we were really interested in doing looked like we'd do tours anyway. So we decided to drive up to Mount Wellington while we still had the car. Like James said, they do run a shuttle otherwise, but then we dropped off the car afterwards.
And that was it. Then we were back to Ubers and tours. In terms of filling up, you're going to get some sticker shock. Cost to fill up was $108.47.
Aussie dollars.
Aussie dollars, which is in US $76.43. And apparently that price has gone up quite considerably recently, because we were having a chat about somebody and they were saying the prices are crazy.
And for reference, we had a Hyundai Tucson. So we weren't driving a big old SUV or a big car that was just a regular run-of-the-mill, bit bigger than a regular saloon car. So
and the cost,
pretty expensive.
And the cost of car rental here is not cheap. It works out in Australian dollars to about 120 a day.
And that was with a company that's a little bit offside. That was not Hertz or Budget or the ones that are at the airport.
Because we couldn't afford
Because we couldn't afford them, they were even more expensive. So they did offer a shuttle to their areas to go pick up, and it was only like 5 minutes from the airport. So it was pretty convenient. But that was one of the cheaper options that we found. For the last 3 nights of our stay at the Crown Plaza, we did get upgraded, woohoo! And we were in the huge Derwent Suite. So we did have a much bigger living area, a massive dining table. I think you can see like 8 people at this. But the one thing that was nice is we had a microwave and a bigger fridge, like a proper size fridge and sink as well. So we were able to grab something for dinner one evening and just microwave that in the microwave. Nice big walk-in closet area and bathroom. There's a couple quirks in the bathroom which I did find a bit odd, like the glass door to the toilet is not frosted, and the sliding doors that separate the bathroom from the bedroom, also full glass. So it's nice that you can see outside, but a little bit strange if you were maybe traveling with kids or someone that you maybe wouldn't want you to see you on the loo. But anyway.
Or in the bath.
Or in the bath, yeah, bit of an aside.
Or you walk into the glass when you get up in the middle of the night because you close the door.
Just a couple of odd design choices, but it was nice to have the extra space, and we did have a bathtub in here as well. This kind of weird wooden bath, which was a bit odd. I did use it. It was a bit weird though. But still very nice to have a bathtub. And so, yeah, nice big room, lots of outlets, and we enjoyed having the extra space for 3 of the nights that we were here. And of course, we had some great views from this room over the harbour. We are on the 11th floor. They call this the penthouse, I think. So the lounge is literally right above us. So nice views. Nice to enjoy the rain for 2 days that we were here, but still nice views. Ooh, Buzzy bee. So today we are doing a tour to Port Arthur and a 3-hour cruise on the Tasman, around the Tasman Island. And we have just stopped here at the Lavender Distillery and Lavender Stop for some tea and a cream scone.
Infused with lavender.
Infused with lavender.
Your spa theme.
Before we head down to the boat.
Come on. It's just epic. Just absolutely epic.
Incredible scenery. So the second part of our day tour today after the boat, which was really good.
It was epic, wasn't it?
It really was. There was some incredible scenery, and we got to see some bottlenose dolphins and
really close.
Yeah, they were like really close to the boat, and
Seals,
fur seals,
two different types.
2 different types of fur seals, birds, albatross, and the highest cliffs in Australia.
Yes, the scenery around the coast of Australia, what we've seen so far, has been pretty spectacular. It's really, really stood out. This is different to the 12 Apostles because the 12 Apostles was limestone and this is basically volcanic. So it's a lot tougher and a lot more jagged and a lot more spectacular.
And they call them church organ cliffs because of the shape that they have, and they resemble church organ pipes. So yeah, it was very, very cool.
And the weather was pretty much perfect. They normally don't do as much along the coast because the weather's too bad. They do give out ginger pills and they do warn about seasickness. No one was seasick because it was a very calm day.
Although the first part around the south, they said they only get to do the whole thing 60 times a year. So I think we were really lucky today. And the weather was really good today, apparently. But the first part was
A little nautical.
a little bit nautical, yes. I think they said 3 to 4 metres swell, so which you're in a small rib boat, which takes 43 people. So it was interesting.
Yes. But it was a really cool experience.
It did calm down later on, but it's if you are prone to motion sickness, I would not do this in a million years.
I would do it on a calm day. We picked a really good day. Bit of luck,
But it was
still
still choppy. If you are very prone to motion sickness, don't do it. But it was really, really enjoyable.
Yeah, and I think it was a good choice. But the options were, we either did a full day exploring Port Arthur and the historical site, or we spend half the day doing the boat and half a day doing Port Arthur. So
we opted to do half a day on each. So we did about 2.5 hours on the boat after our quick stop for tea this morning, and then we've had about 3 hours here total to eat lunch. They did provide lunch, which was like basically a sandwich. You got to choose that before we left this morning, which was basically a sandwich, a bowl of soup as well, nice soup, like a vegetable soup.
hot soup, yeah.
And apple water or juice, and a cookie. So that was pretty nice. So we had like 3 hours here to eat lunch and then basically go and explore. If you are mobility impaired, they do have little golf cart shuttles that you do need to wait for, but they'll ferry you around. So we did sort of half that and half walked. We took the shuttle up the hill and then walked back. But there's a couple of bits we didn't see. I think if you probably need longer than we've had here, honestly.
I think this is the trade-off. We really only saw 4 main buildings, which we researched, and there were the 4 main buildings. If you want to do this place justice, you've really got to come here for a lot longer than this. A lot of people do overnights or do a full day here or 3/4 of a day. We did about 2.5 hours and we didn't see it all.
No, we probably needed another 2 hours. And then there's a little 25-minute boat tour you can do as well, which we didn't do. But that is included in the ticket price. There's also free talks available here. We sort of stumbled across a couple.
But we didn't have time.
But we didn't really have time. We just sort of wandered around. So behind me, in the most prestigious part of Port Arthur, is the Commandant's House. And this was home to 10 commandants over the period that this was a penitentiary. Very nice location it is too, with a north-facing outlook over the water and some nice trees. We did have a look around. There's various additions that were made as well. And at one time it was operating as a boarding house, which would have been an interesting place to come and stay for sure.
The separate prison, which is the first place that we went to, is basically solitary confinement. There's not a great deal of signage here, but basically this is where prisoners would go and they could not speak in any way at all, no communication. And they would be kept there as punishment, or perhaps the worst of the worst.
Rule 24. The convict is then to be shown his cell and caused to examine it carefully in order that any marking or defacing may be at once detected.
And you could go into the punishment cell, what was described as the punishment cell, which was basically an individual cell completely in the dark. I know they still have these in some prisons now, but it was like it would have been complete sensory deprivation if you were shut in there, because even when you just walked in and the door was open, it was pitch dark in there. So this is the punishment cell, and I've got my cell phone on. I'm going to turn it down so you can see how dark it is in here. so pitch black. I would not want to be shut in here. It's maybe 5 feet square at best. Yeah, that's creepy. Let's go. There was also individual exercise areas and the chapel, which again had like separation, so that if you were going there for chapel, you would still be separated from the other prisons. And you'd be standing. You wouldn't be able to see anyone. So you weren't allowed to speak. You weren't allowed to see anyone. Talk. Would be pretty grim.
As a result of that, they had to build, strangely enough, an asylum next door, and I'm sure the two are very well connected. And the asylum there's nothing to see there now as to what the asylum used to be, because it is now a museum and a cafe. So there are no remnants of that apart from the actual walls.
Yeah, so the inside was a display basically about the kids that were sent there, and it talked about what kind of crimes they may have committed, which were simple things like maybe stealing a handkerchief. But in the 1800s, things were much more scarce. So a handkerchief was worth the equivalent now of maybe like £100. So it would have been a valuable item then. But they were sent there for crimes such as that. And this whole display described what their lives were like, how they were treated as children. They were set into hard labour. There wasn't any playtime as such. There was kids as young as 9 that went here, and I think the eldest was 19. And there was also an area that talked about their lives afterwards and whether they were reformed characters or whether they went on to be successful or be reoffenders.
The exhibition is called Little Deprived Felons, and the boys started coming over from 1834, and this was actually the first child prison in the British Empire. And they were sent over to a place called Point Pure, which is just across the bay, because they wanted to keep the children separate from the hardened criminals. And you can actually visit that as part of the day, but because of time, we only had a few hours here. We didn't get an opportunity to do that.
I think that it's also included in your ticket as well, your entrance ticket, as are the talks that are available. So we mentioned a lot of places there wasn't a great deal of signage up about what each thing was, but there were lots of talks available that were free to join as well.
And I think if you were here for maybe half a day or 5 or 6, 7 hours, then you could really get some advantage. You can go in and see all of these, because they were all free and they were all very frequent, and it would help you understand it, but we didn't have that option. The last place we went was the penitentiary, which is probably the most famous building because it's right at the front.
Welcome to the penitentiary. There's not a lot of signs here to tell us anything else, but we'll tell you more when we find out.
It is partly demolished. You can only really see the cells on the bottom level, and these would be the cells that would be, if you were a standard prisoner,
Gen Pop. These
would be your general population, and there would be an area to wash, there would be an area to exercise, that you would be catered for in similar circumstances to what we would understand a regular prison of the time. So why is Port Arthur famous? It's a prison. Well, between 1788 and the next 80 years, prisoners from the British Empire were sent to these penal colonies, and this is the best example that still remains of a penal colony used by the Empire. And this policy of sending people away out of Great Britain and sending them to Australia. That's why it's famous. It's so well preserved, it's also a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
And prisoners were sent here from the UK because at the time cities were getting bigger in the UK and people were concerned about overcrowding, there wasn't enough jobs and crime was on the increase. And there was a little bit of a fear at the time about how that crime would then manifest itself into kind of society. So they wanted to be able to nip it in the bud and deal with it. And so a way of dealing with that and the overcrowding situation was to basically pick these people up and ship them off to penal colonies in other countries. Of course, at the time, colonisation was still happening, and it was a way of also exercising power into other countries and being able to colonise more freely.
And labour. The cost of this tour for the two people, for both of us, was 550 Australian dollars, which in US equivalent at the current exchange rate worked out to about 391 US dollars.
And that included our coach there down to Port Arthur, which was about an hour and a half to get there, the boat tour for 3 hours, a stop for tea and a scone at the lavender farm, our lunch that was included at Port Arthur, and the coach back, and we were dropped off pretty much at the hotel. So there was quite a lot included. You did get it, your lunch and everything included, so comparable with US, but not cheap.
No, not cheap. 25% of all take-ins or all profits go to wildlife conservation, and the guy that runs this, I think it's Pennicott. You can book it with various people, but you all end up on Pennicott Wildlife Tours boats. So I'm not quite sure of the deal, but he's kind of cornered the market on these big yellow boats.
We booked with Pennicott directly. So Saturday morning, and where's the best place to be in Hobart on Saturday morning? So we're told
Salamanca
Market. So we're going to have a look around. So as we were here over a Saturday in Hobart, we did go to Salamanca Market. Lots of people had recommended this to us, and so we couldn't not do it. We couldn't not. So
and the weather was gorgeous.
It was a very nice day, yeah. So we went down there and got dropped off. To put it in perspective, it's a big market. There is a huge area for food as you enter, or the area where we entered anyway, near the quay. It's just along the waterside there. There was a big area set aside for eating, and then basically a lot of local artisan handicrafts, locally made produce, lots of organic and homegrown food, tons of distilleries. It seems like everybody here seems to make a gin.
It's either a gin or a honey or a gin infused honey.
There was some local cheese as well, I think.
Yeah.
So lots of like nice high-end produce.
It's not a cheap market.
No, it's not a market. Like, don't think Southeast Asia, don't think a market. It's a lot of high-end stuff that's expensive.
Or made in Australia stuff, or artisan stuff, or quality stuff. You're not going to come here and find that many bargains. You'll find good quality stuff.
There was a lot of merino products, so scarves, gloves, jackets. I did find a cheap stall. Everything was $5, and I picked up some socks and some souvenir-y things. There was only really like 2 souvenir stands, and even there the stuff wasn't overly market cheap, but everything else was like more artisan stuff, a lot of wood turned stuff. I picked up a pewter kangaroo figurine that's only about this big, but again, it was locally made by the guy it was his stall. A lot of paintings, so a lot of artists selling their stuff there. It was more farmers market-y than market, but really cool to walk around. Tons of different food options. They looked like some really great food options. We had a big breakfast, so we didn't end up trying anything, but they looked like some really nice food.
And it is busy.
Super busy. We then took a little bit of a short walk around the quay, Elizabeth Quay. There's another little pier there that has a couple of shops in and some cafes and restaurants. So we just had a bit of a stroll around and took it easy for the rest of the day.
And a steam crane.
And a steam crane, yes.
From
our hometown
of Leicester. And it's one of the best examples of steam cranes that still exist. So there you go, shout out to Leicester. Whoop whoop.
The Blue Army. Welcome to Bruny Island. So our last tour that we did was to Bruny Island, and Bruny Island is another island off of the island of Tasmania. And to get there, it's about a 40-minute drive from the centre of Hobart, where you'll reach Kettering, and that's going to be where you get on the car ferry to take about another 10 or 15-minute ride over on the car ferry to actually get to Bruny Island. We booked this tour again with Pennicott, the same company we'd used to go to Port Arthur, and so the bus picked us up centrally in Hobart and then took us down to the car ferry.
Our first stop, once we'd got over on the Sea Link ferry, was the Neck, which is this narrow band of, well, it is actually a road now. Bruny Island used to be 2 islands, and with natural occurring sediment and sand, it's actually joined the 2 islands together. So there is a road there and there is a point. We did not go up the 253 stairs.
Thought it was more than that, but okay.
Over 200 stairs.
We went about halfway up.
Yeah, we just decided to take a scenic view because we only had 20 so minutes there. But it is very picturesque. The beaches do look gorgeous and there's nobody there. I mean, this is like, it looks a bit Caribbean beach-like, but with no people. Absolutely, there's like one person standing there. That's probably because of the temperature of the water. Because we were not going to go into that water.
There's also penguins that come here as well. We did see some of the burrows, wrong time of day because they come in the evening, just like we did in Melbourne. But there are penguins there and a ton of different bird life here as well. Just standing at that point on the other side, we could see black swans, which I always think is odd when it's seawater. But there was black swans and a ton of seagulls, other birds, lots of wildlife going on. There was actually a birding festival the weekend that we were there, but we didn't get to join that, sadly. That's the sort of thing I would have liked, but we didn't get to join that.
The other animal that Bruny Island is famous for is, and you did see it.
I did see a white wallaby. I saw it when we left, as we were leaving from the bus. I didn't get a picture, sadly, because I thought I was seeing things initially, because there was a white one and a regular coloured one. And I thought, oh, it's a lawn ornament, because it was in someone's front lawn as well. And then it moved and realised it was actually, no, it's real wallabies. So we did get to see, well, I got to see one.
Yes.
So our next stop was Adventure Bay, which is where Pennicott have their location for their boats, and they have like their own welcome centre there with a restaurant. So we had a cup of tea here, just like on the other tour that we did, cup of tea and a muffin, before we headed out to board the boats. There was 3 boats running this day. It was a Sunday. I would have chosen not to go on a Sunday because we knew it would be busier, but the weather was it was the last good weather day we were going to have, so we decided to go for it. So every boat was full. It was really busy, but we did manage to snag a seat at the front of the boat this time. At Port Arthur we didn't, so we were outside and we got a great view.
Fantastic view.
We had another 3-hour tour here, so a bit more of an adventure ride this time. They sort of powered the boats between rocks and did a bit more turns. Nothing over the top. It wasn't a thrill ride, it wasn't one of those, but we did get to have a bit of fun and see some more of the scenery, the rocks. We went into quite a few caves, like literally took the boat into the caves, which was pretty incredible.
And I suppose there's large similarities between the Port Arthur tour and this tour, because you see seals.
Yeah, fur seals,
Australian fur seals. You also see these black and white birds, which I think are cormorants, but they look like penguins. And if you look at them from a distance, you would think they were a penguin. And we saw albatrosses on both tours. They're both against this amazing backdrop that surrounds the whole of Hobart. And it is pretty spectacular, but it's a completely different type of rock. Were there similarities? Yes,
definitely.
But this one was definitely, we backed into these caves, we went through these pillars between the two. It was a lot more fun.
It was. I think if you're going for scenery, Port Arthur probably, I thought, was more rugged and more interesting. This was very nice, very pretty. The caves were cool, the fur seals were cool. We also saw a white-bellied eagle very much in the distance. I did manage to get a photo with my camera though. And we also had our best dolphin encounter. We did see dolphins in Port Arthur and that was cool, but this was super cool because they were so close to the boat and jumping out, and they were around us for a few minutes.
You could see them under the water following the boat. Apparently this is a regular occurrence. They do get whales around here, but again, wrong time of year.
We're about a month early for the whales, I think he said.
So, but yes.
The dolphins were super cool though.
Dolphins was pretty special. And that was it was a beautiful day. It was a beautiful day, and on both the Port Arthur tour and this tour, when the weather gets a bit crappy, when the weather gets choppier, nautical, then there's a lot more waves, and I would assume that it would either change the itinerary or perhaps cancel the trip, or just not make it as much fun as we had, because it was pretty still and we had a great time.
Yeah, I mean, boat still moved a lot. They gave us ginger tablets, both of those trips at the start. They offered everyone ginger tablets for motion sickness. And they also give you a big red jacket, full-length jacket that you can wear if you want to protect you against the wind. Even though it was like, I think about 70 degrees, so 22, 23 Celsius, it was pretty cool. Once you were out on the water, it got really quite chilly.
About 10 degrees different.
Especially the Port Arthur day, that was really quite chilly once you were out there. So they do tell you to take layers, and they do give you these coats. But both times, even though we had good weather, it was still pretty rocky. You know, you're on a small boat, not much bigger than a Zodiac. They're 43 people, I think the boats take, so they're not big boats. But yeah, a lot of fun. Once we got back to Adventure Bay, we then had lunch, which was included. I had fish and chips, which was delicious. They do a fish here, I think it's called jewfish, and it's a really nice thick fish that's a bit like cod. Very nice. After that, we headed back to Hobart. A heads up on the car ferry. You don't buy tickets. There is a schedule, but it was particularly busy, and you just drive up, line up, and get on the ferry. And he did warn us on the way back that it was likely to be busy, and we did have to wait, I think, about 40 minutes in the end.
Yeah, I think we waited 2 ferries.
They run a ferry every 20 minutes, so I think we waited about 40 minutes just to get onto the car ferry to come back. So that's really what took up the most time to come back. After that, another 45-minute drive dropped us back in Hobart. So
the cost of this tour again was 660 Australian dollars for both of us, which works out at the current exchange rate to 470 US dollars for both of us.
Again, expensive. Probably up there with what you would pay in the US, but yeah. Everything in Australia is expensive.
And all Australian tours, in our experience of New Zealand a few years ago, Melbourne and here, they all seem to have these very long tours that cover a lot of things that are pretty expensive. So you do see a lot, and I will say it was a good tour.
As an aside, one last thing that I did do here was I went and got my nails done. For ladies, if you're interested in what it costs, I went to Sally's Nail Bar. They did an okay job, and it was 60 Australian dollars for a gel fill. So that's about 45 US ish. So on a par with what it costs in the US. Like I said, it's an okay job. Not as good as I have done in South America, but it was doable and like 3 doors from the hotel, so it was convenient. We did have a quick look around the other shops in the area. The Crown Plaza is really well located if you do need to run out for anything. It's located on Liverpool Street, so basically there's a whole ton of shops and restaurants around here. A shopping mall at the back, which has got a big Target. There's a Woolworths just down the road, H&M, Lululemon, lots of outdoorsy places. I think I saw a Patagonia shop as well. Birkenstock, Skechers, to give you an idea. Basically, there's a lot here. We were surprised how big the city is. Honestly, we weren't expecting such a big city. But if you do need to buy anything, it would be, I think you would find it and be available here if you had forgotten anything. The hotel's not bad. The lounge is not bad. Again, expensive for, I guess not for Australia, but yeah.
Yeah, I think
it's a theme in Australia.
Yeah, I think there's some things we've learnt in Australia so far. We've only been here for what, 3 weeks now. We've learnt that everything's expensive. Australians shorten every single name that they can. So we're in Tassie, not Tasmania. We've been to Lorney, which is Launceston. And we've also been to, where we are now, Hobart, which is what the locals call Hobart, because the pace of life is definitely slower in Hobart.
As is the internet speed.
As is everything. It's a slower pace of life, but it is still a big city. So it's a bit of a crazy situation.
Yeah. But that's why you travel, to experience different things. So we are going to be headed to the airport shortly. We're flying back to Adelaide. So join us next time, where tomorrow, not tomorrow for you, but tomorrow for us, we are going to be joining
a big train.
The Indian Pacific, which is a luxury train from Adelaide. It actually goes from Sydney. We're joining it in Adelaide over to Perth.
So if you want to see that adventure come along, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And remember, even in Australia, you're here for a good time, not for a long time. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye for now.